I started my first year of university last year, filled with excitement and a touch of nervousness, eager to embrace the independence that came with living on campus. My assigned residence was one of the oldest buildings on the university grounds, a place with history carved into its very walls. The ceilings were high, the wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the scent of aged books and old stone lingered in the air. It had once been a school for nuns, and while the institution itself had long since transitioned into a student dormitory, remnants of its past remained. Legends whispered through the halls like a draft slipping through the cracks, carried by generations of students who had lived there before me. The most infamous tale was that of the Blue Nun, a sorrowful spirit said to wander the corridors at night, forever bound to the place of her demise. Alongside her, there were stories of the Red Priest, a far more sinister presence, and some even claimed to have seen the fleeting shadow of a little girl. At first, these ghost stories seemed like nothing more than a tradition, a way for upperclassmen to spook newcomers, but the weight of their words lingered in my mind longer than I cared to admit. The atmosphere of the residence only added to the unease. Long, dimly lit corridors stretched endlessly. The silence at night was almost oppressive, and the old wooden doors groaned as if whispering their own secrets. Though I brushed off the stories as nothing more than superstition, the first few weeks in the residence planted a seed of doubt. Strange occurrences began subtly. Small objects in my room weren't where I left them. Whispers in the dead of night sent shivers down my spine, and I often felt the inexplicable sensation of being watched. It was easy to dismiss these things as tricks of my imagination, fueled by exhaustion and late-night study sessions. But as the days passed, the disturbances grew harder to ignore. Lights flickered at odd moments, my bed felt ice-cold despite the heating, and sometimes, the floorboards outside my door creaked under the weight of unseen footsteps. The building, old as it was, had its quirks, but deep down, I knew that something far beyond rational explanation lurked within its walls. From the very first day, whispers of the residence's haunted history made their way into conversations. It was a tale passed down through generations of students, a chilling legend that had woven itself into the fabric of university life. There were said to be 3 ghosts, the Blue Nun, the Red Priest, and, though accounts varied, a little girl who appeared only to a select few. The most well-known spirit was the Blue Nun, a tragic figure tied to a forbidden love. She had, as the story went, fallen for a priest. Whether their relationship was one of mutual passion or something far darker was never clear, but guilt and shame consumed her until she made the fatal decision to leap from the tower. The tragedy wasn't mere rumor. It was documented in university archives, a real death recorded as an on-campus suicide decades ago. As the legend continued, the nun's presence still lingered. If a student left their desk chair upright at night, she would visit them in their sleep. Some swore she would tidy rooms, make beds, or rearrange belongings. Others, less fortunate, claimed she would stand in the corner, watching silently, her presence an icy weight pressing into the room. At the time, I dismissed it as nonsense. Ghost stories were fun in the right setting, but I had no patience for superstition. I was a skeptic, a firm non-believer. The only things haunting a university dorm, I reasoned, were exams, stress, and the occasional bad decision at a party. That certainty lasted precisely 2 weeks. It was a late night in the lounge, a gathering place for students to unwind and share stories. The topic of conversation inevitably drifted toward the residence's ghostly reputation. One of the community assistants, responsible for supervising the dorm, took great pleasure in retelling the tale. I listened, amused, as they wove the familiar legend with practiced ease, their voice dropping to a near whisper as they described the nun's lingering spirit. I scoffed. The atmosphere was perfect for storytelling. Dim lighting, a storm rolling in outside, the occasional flicker of the old bulbs above us. I wasn't about to be sucked into it. I leaned back in my chair, smirking as I threw out sarcastic remarks. Oh no, the scary nun. Should I be trembling? I teased. Come on, Blue Nun, do your worst. I dare you. Laughter rippled through the group, but I noticed a few uneasy glances exchanged between some of the older students. It was clear that, joke or not, many took the story seriously. I waved off their concern, unconvinced. Eventually, we all retreated to our rooms for the night. I bid my friends good night, climbed into bed, and settled in with a show playing softly on my laptop. The storm outside had picked up, rain tapping insistently against the window. The glow from the screen cast flickering shadows on the walls, and despite the eerie conversation earlier, I felt nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't asleep. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, thinking about breakfast plans for the morning when it happened. A shift in the air. The room, once comfortably warm, grew noticeably colder. Not a gradual chill, but a sudden, unnatural drop in temperature. The fine hairs on my arms stood on end, a shiver crawling up my spine. The sensation was distinct, a weight pressing against my shoulder. Not a gentle touch, not the brush of a blanket shifting. A pressure, as if fingers were pressing down, deliberate and firm. Then, so close to my ear it sent a bolt of panic through my chest. A whisper. No words, just the faintest breath of sound, like something exhaling, inches away from my skin. My heart slammed against my ribs. My body locked up, frozen in place, the rational part of my brain scrambling for an explanation. It was nothing, a draft, a trick of the mind. Anything but what I knew, deep down, had just occurred. With every ounce of willpower, I forced myself to move. I whipped around, my breath caught in my throat, expecting. What? A figure looming over me? A face inches from my own? The room was empty, but the feeling remained. Presence. An unshakable certainty that someone, had been there just moments ago. I fumbled for my lamp, the light flooding the space with a harsh glow. My hands trembled as I reached for my glasses, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. Nothing was out of place, but I knew what I had felt, what I had heard, and suddenly, the legend of the Blue Nun wasn't just a story anymore. I tried to rationalize that night in my head over and over again. Maybe I had been half asleep, trapped in that strange state where reality and dreams blur together. But I wasn't asleep. I was fully conscious, thinking about breakfast, my mind alert. And no matter how many times I tried to convince myself otherwise, I couldn't ignore the way my skin had prickled with awareness, the undeniable weight of something pressing on my shoulder, the whisper, so close, too close. From that night on, I started flipping my chair over religiously before going to bed. It became a ritual, an unspoken attempt to keep whatever was in my room at bay. I stopped scoffing at the legend of the Blue Nun. I no longer laughed when my friends told their own eerie stories. I started sleeping with my lights on. The disturbances continued, small things at first. I would enter my room and find my shoes lined up perfectly against the wall. Not just neatly placed, but positioned with a precision that felt unnatural. The laces tucked in, the toes of the shoes aligned like someone had taken meticulous care to arrange them. I knew I hadn't done it. Some nights, as I lay in bed, I would hear faint noises coming from my closet. A soft shuffling, a creak that didn't match the rhythm of the building settling. I stopped opening the closet at night altogether. Things began to disappear. At first, it was little objects, hair ties, pens, my student ID, items that could easily be misplaced. But then it escalated. My pictures and calendars vanished from the walls. Not fallen, not hidden under my bed or behind my desk. Just gone. I searched everywhere. Days, sometimes weeks, would pass before they returned, appearing exactly where they had been before. No sign of disturbance, no logical reason for their absence. I started keeping track, marking down the dates when things disappeared and when they came back. But there was no pattern, no explanation, and I wasn't the only one. My friend, who lived a few doors down, had the same experiences. She would buy new makeup brushes to replace the ones she had lost, only to find the missing ones back in their original spots days later. Another girl from my floor swore she woke up to find her closet door open, wide open, when she knew for certain she had closed it the night before. Then there were the nights when the entire residence seemed to shift. The halls were always eerie after dark, the old building groaning with the weight of time. But between 2 and 4 in the morning, something changed. The lights in the corridors would cut out, leaving the hallways in absolute darkness. Not dim lighting, not flickering bulbs, pure, suffocating blackness. We were told it was an electrical issue, a quirk of the old wiring. But it happened too consistently, too perfectly timed, to be anything other than deliberate. I refused to leave my room during those hours. One night I had no choice. It was late, and I had just finished doing laundry in the basement. My clothes were still warm from the dryer as I carried them back up to my room, the basket balanced against my hip. I was exhausted, my body aching from a long day, my mind fuzzy with fatigue. I tossed my laundry basket on the floor and sat on my bed, brushing out my damp hair. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just letting the repetitive motion lull me into a daze. Then, out of the corner of my eye, the basket moved. Not a subtle shift, not a slow slide caused by an uneven floor. It jerked 2 inches to the left. I froze, my brush still tangled in my hair. The air changed in an instant. That feeling washed over me again, the icy, oppressive weight pressing against my skin. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, the sudden awareness that I was not alone slamming into me with brutal force. The temperature plummeted, a sharp, unnatural cold that made my breath hitch. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted. No slippers, no glasses, just raw panic propelling me out of my room and down the hall. I didn't care if I looked ridiculous, if anyone saw me sprinting barefoot through the corridors. I couldn't stay in that room, not with that presence. I reached my friend's door and banged on it, barely able to get the words out when she answered. She took one look at me, at my pale face, my trembling hands, and didn't ask questions. She grabbed her phone and followed me back. But when we got there, nothing had changed. The basket was exactly where I had left it. The room was silent, the air warm again. No sign of movement, no evidence of what I had seen. I still refused to sleep there alone that night. The next morning, I checked every inch of my room. I wanted to believe I had imagined it, that exhaustion had played tricks on my eyes. But the feeling lingered, and the disturbances only grew worse. The weeks passed, and the tension in our residence only grew. What started as strange occurrences, items moving, eerie whispers, the overwhelming sensation of being watched, turned into full-blown disturbances that left some of us questioning our sanity. One night in early fall, I was on the phone with my friend who lived on the floor above me. It was late, close to 2 in the morning, and we were talking about nothing important, just passing the time before sleep. She had taken me with her, virtually, as she walked to the communal bathroom, the sound of her footsteps echoing slightly over the call. It was normal, something we did often. But then, as she was heading back to her room, she suddenly whispered, "Hold on." Then the line went dead. I called back. No answer. I texted. No response. Minutes passed, and I felt a tight, creeping unease coil in my stomach. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the silence, maybe it was just paranoia setting in, but something felt off. Then, out of nowhere, she sent me a Snapchat video. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The screen was shaky, as if her hands were trembling, and the lighting was dim. She was standing outside her door, recording the hallway. The air was thick with a low, strange sound, something I couldn't quite place. A faint rustling? A whisper? A dragging noise? I strained to make sense of it, my heart hammering. Then she turned the camera to her doorknob, twisted on its own. The door creaked open, revealing the inside of her room, and my breath caught in my throat. Her space, normally neat and organized, was a disaster. Her clothes had been ripped from her dresser, shoes scattered across the floor, books and papers strewn across her desk. And then, in the final seconds of the video, I saw it. A single sheet of paper lifted into the air and drifted unnaturally, as if moved by unseen fingers. The video cut off. I sat there, staring at my screen, my mind refusing to process what I had just witnessed. My first instinct was to run upstairs, but my body felt frozen. She called me minutes later, her voice shaking. She swore up and down that she had locked her door, that everything had been perfectly normal when she left. I tried to rationalize it, to say it must have been the wind, but then I remembered, her window had been shut. And even if it had been open, the paper had moved in the opposite direction of where a breeze would have pushed it. Other people doubted her, said she had made the mess herself, but I knew her too well. She was meticulous, always kept her space clean, and even if she had somehow trashed her own room, she wouldn't have been able to fake that paper moving. Not like that. The atmosphere in the residence changed after that. People whispered about things happening in their own rooms, objects disappearing and reappearing, phones glitching at strange moments, mirrors cracking without reason. It was as if something unseen had fully woken up, and it was letting us all know it was there. Then came the night of the screaming. I had been half asleep, drifting in and out of consciousness, when a sound jolted me awake. A scream, blood-curdling, raw, filled with sheer, unfiltered terror, ripped through the silence of the hallway. It wasn't a drunken yell. It wasn't someone playing a prank. It was the kind of scream that clawed its way into your bones, the kind that made every hair on your body stand on end. For a split second, I couldn't move. I just lay there, pulse thundering in my ears, my body paralyzed by instinctual fear. Then suddenly silence. I waited, listening, but the screaming didn't return. No sounds of running footsteps, no panicked voices, just nothing. The next morning, I found out who it had been. My neighbor, a guy I barely knew. He mostly kept to himself, the kind of person you saw in passing but never really spoke to. He had always seemed indifferent to the eerie atmosphere of the residence, shrugging off the stories, rolling his eyes whenever someone mentioned the whispers, the footsteps, the flickering lights. But something had changed overnight. By the time word got around, he was already packing. Within days, he was gone. Left without a word to most people, breaking his lease without hesitation. His friends teased him mercilessly, calling him paranoid, a coward. But he didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just left. For weeks, no one knew why. Then, one evening, I ran into him off campus. He looked different, more withdrawn, like he hadn't been sleeping much. There was something in his eyes, something wary, as if he was still expecting to wake up and find himself back in that room. I asked him why he left. He hesitated at first, shifting uncomfortably like he didn't want to talk about it. But eventually, he told me the truth. That night, he had woken up suddenly, not knowing why. His room was dark, his blankets tangled around him. His mind was groggy, half lost between sleep and waking. But something felt wrong. Something was there. At first, he thought it was just the weight of the night pressing down on him, that vague unease that sometimes comes in the quiet hours before dawn. But then he felt it, an awareness, a presence lingering too close. His skin prickled, every instinct in his body screaming at him not to move, not to look. But he did. And when he opened his eyes, she was standing over him. A little girl, not a student, not a shadow or a trick of the light. A girl, pale, silent, watching him. She stood so still, her face expressionless, her dark eyes locked onto his. He swore he could see the rise and fall of her breath, the subtle movement of her hair as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. She wasn't transparent, not some hazy apparition. She was solid, real, impossibly real. And then he screamed. In a blind panic, he lunged for his bedside lamp, his hands fumbling against the switch. The moment the light flooded the room, she was gone. No movement, no sound. Just an empty space where she had been. He tore through his room, checked his closet, looked under his bed. Nothing. The door was locked, the windows shut. He had been alone, but he knew what he saw, and he refused to stay another night. After that, I became obsessed. I scoured forums, searched through archives, tried to find any history that could explain what was happening in our residence. But there was barely anything. Just the same stories passed down year after year, the blue nun, the red priest, and the unknown little girl. Then came the night we went into the tunnels. It was a huge campus event. Everyone was partying, energy buzzing through the air. The tunnels beneath the residence were strictly off-limits. They were old, dangerous, and if you were caught down there, you'd get fined. But that night, something pulled at me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the lingering terror from the past few months. Or maybe something wanted us to go down there. I still don't know how we got in. I swear, to this day, I cannot remember. One moment, my two friends and I were talking about the tunnels. The next, we were inside. The walls were rough, lined with old bricks and decaying pipes. The air was damp, thick with the scent of earth and mildew. The tunnels stretched in multiple directions, some disappearing into complete darkness. Our footsteps echoed unnaturally, making it impossible to tell if we were truly alone. Then the feeling hit us. It was unlike anything I had felt before. The room incidents had been eerie, unsettling, but this was different. It was cold, but not just physically cold. Something deeper, something primal. A deep, marrow-chilling sensation of being watched. Not just watched, hunted. My skin prickled. My breath came in shallow gasps. The fine hairs on my arms stood up. My friends felt it too. I could see it in their wide eyes, the way their bodies tensed, the way they instinctively moved closer together. Something was there. I don't know how long we stood in that space, paralyzed by the thick, suffocating silence. It was as if time had stopped, as if the tunnel itself had swallowed us whole. The air was stale, damp with the scent of old stone and something else. Something metallic, almost like rust. Or blood. My breath felt too loud in my chest, each inhale shaky, each exhale barely controlled. Then footsteps, not ours, from somewhere deeper within the darkness. Slow, deliberate, heavy. At first, we thought we had imagined it, that our fear was playing tricks on us. But then we heard it again, closer this time. A dragging sound accompanied each step, like something being pulled along the floor. A chill crawled up my spine, and I could feel the tiny hairs on my arms standing on end. None of us spoke. None of us dared move. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the feeling snapped. Panic surged through us, and we ran. We didn't care about the fine. We didn't care if we got caught. We just needed to get out. The tunnels twisted, turned, stretched in directions we didn't recognize. We retraced our steps, but the paths didn't look the same. It was as if the tunnels themselves had changed, shifting like a living thing, trapping us within its walls. The further we ran, the worse it got. The air grew heavier, thicker, pressing against our lungs like unseen hands. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a presence, something that watched, something that waited. And then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, no more than a murmur at the edge of hearing. But they grew. Soft voices, too many to count, speaking over one another in a language we didn't understand. They wove through the tunnels, bouncing off the walls, seeping into our bones. We weren't alone. In a moment of pure desperation, we pulled out our phones and called safety and security. We didn't tell them what had really happened. We just begged them to get us out. When they arrived, they didn't ask questions. They didn't lecture us. They just let us out quickly. Later, we found out why. People whispered about the Red Priest, that he lived in the tunnels, that he was the real danger, and that the Blue Nun, she was the only thing keeping him from escaping. I spent the rest of the year living in that residence, but something had shifted in me. I no longer viewed the Blue Nun as something to fear. Instead, I felt a strange sense of protection, as if she had been watching over us all along. After my aunt told me the stories passed down by former students, I stopped making fun of her entirely. I even started greeting her when I came back to my room at night. It sounds ridiculous, but it felt right. If I heard noises from my closet, I'd just say, "Good evening, sister," and go about my night. And she never stopped making her presence known. My mini fridge would open and close on its own, sometimes in the dead of night. I'd hear the faint sound of fabric rustling when nothing was moving. Occasionally, I'd return to my room and find my bed made, even though I knew I had left it messy. My friends had their own encounters, too. Books knocked off shelves, locked doors swinging open, mirrors cracking unprompted. Some were unnerved by it. Others, like me, simply accepted it. But we all agreed on one thing: whatever the nun was, she wasn't the one to be afraid of. The real fear was what lay beneath us. Even months after our night in the tunnels, I still had nightmares about it. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I could hear those slow, deliberate footsteps echoing in the dark. Some nights, I swore I heard faint whispers. Not in my room, but beneath me, as if the tunnels stretched further than we had thought. I never went back down there. None of us did. The rest of the year passed with more unexplained events, but at some point we stopped questioning them. It became part of life in the residence, something you either learned to accept or let consume you with fear. When the school year ended and we packed up to leave, I found myself lingering in my empty room, hesitant to close the door one final time. I felt like I owed her something. So before I left, I whispered, "Thank you." The fridge door creaked open in response. I smiled. It wasn't until later that summer, while scrolling through an old local history page, that I stumbled upon something chilling. A faded newspaper clipping about the Red Priest. The article was old, decades old, but the details were strikingly familiar. It spoke of a priest, one whose name had been deliberately erased from records, known only by the whispers of past students. He had once lived on campus, long before it was a residence, when the building served as a religious institution. But something had been wrong with him. The Red Priest, as he came to be called in hushed whispers, had been a figure shrouded in secrecy and fear. He wasn't like the other clergy members who had once walked these halls. There was something darker about him, something that left a stain on the building's history. Some said he was deeply devoted, but not to God, at least not to the one the nuns worshipped. There were accounts, buried in whispers, of strange rituals conducted in the dead of night. People spoke of candles burning long after curfew, of Latin incantations echoing through the corridors when no one should have been awake, of visitors, people who arrived but never left. The school, desperate to maintain its reputation, buried the stories under layers of silence, denying anything had ever been amiss. But the walls never forget, and neither do the ghosts of those who suffered. And then one day he was gone. No body, no record, just vanished. His absence was never explained. No formal announcement was made. The priests and nuns who remained simply pretended he had never existed, as though erasing his name could erase his sins. But the students knew better. They whispered theories, some more outlandish than others, but one rumor persisted above all the rest: the tunnels. A labyrinth of stone passageways ran beneath the building, remnants of an older time when underground walkways connected different parts of the school. Most had been sealed off, but some claimed that the Red Priest had used them, disappearing into the darkness below, never to be seen again. Or perhaps never to be seen in the same way again. The final lines of the article I found sent a shiver down my spine. They say the tunnels are cursed, that those who enter may not always return, that something ancient and malevolent still lingers in the suffocating dark, its presence like a shadow that never fades. The air grows heavy, thick with whispers and dread, as if the very ground beneath you is alive, waiting. But if you're lucky, you'll never meet him, because the nun, with her cold, unyielding gaze and silent prayers, will keep him at bay. She stands as a barrier between you and the unspeakable horrors that dwell below, her rosary clutched tightly, her voice a soft murmur of incantations. Yet even she knows the darkness is patient. It waits, watching, ever hungry. The question is not whether it will come, but when. For the first time, I truly considered what had been happening to me. The cold spots, the whispers, the feeling of unseen eyes watching from the corners of my room. They had terrified me, yes, but they had never harmed me. If anything, they had been warnings, subtle signs of something unseen, something restrained. I had spent months fearing the Blue Nun, believing she was the one haunting us. But what if she was never the danger? What if she had been protecting us all along? I wasn't a believer before. I laughed at the stories, mocked the superstitions. The idea of spirits lurking in the shadows seemed absurd to me. But after everything, after the unnerving nights where I felt a presence standing at my bedside, its cold breath brushing against my skin like a warning, after the times I woke to find my door unlocked when I knew I had bolted it shut with unshakable certainty, after that spine-chilling trip to the tunnels where something unseen had pressed against my chest. A weight as oppressive as a storm cloud, making it harder to breathe. I can say with certainty, ghosts are real. They are not mere figments of imagination or whispered legends. And that residence is not just haunted. It's alive with a malevolent energy. Its very walls seem to breathe with an ancient sorrow, pulsing in time with the darkness that clings to every corner. The house is a vessel for something far older and far darker than I could ever have imagined. What I thought were myths are now my nightly terrors. The echoes of the past are far from silent. They are watching, waiting, and I am no longer laughing. It's alive, and that's a fact. So take what you will from my story. Believe it or don't. But if you ever find yourself there, if you ever hear the mini fridge creak open in the night or find your bed made when you know you left it messy, say thank you, because she's watching, and she's keeping you safe.